Sorry about that. Welcome to the Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee meeting of April 26, 2022. Today on this committee is Mayor Clayton and myself, Gladys Blackmore, and I expect that there's a possibility that Councillor O'Connor and Councillor Laners will eventually manage to get here. We are going to start with a delegation, so we're going to start with a delegation presentation from Bairstow Laners. You can, it's in my agenda incorrectly, Mr. Wong. You can correct us when you reach the table.
Thank you, Acting Chair Blackmore, Mayor Clayton, Council, and staff. My name's Dan Wong. I'm with Bairstow and Associates Engineering. I'm joined today by Dean Swanberg, who is one of the principals of Landsman Properties, who owns the Aberdeen Centre. So we're here to speak on the report that's in your agenda today. Rather than going through the recommendations in the report, we just wanted to provide a history of the situation behind our perspective of how things came about. I'm going to start with 2006. What happened there was the city approached Landsman Properties to initiate a land swap with Aberdeen Centre. So the intent of that land swap was to provide a mutually beneficial situation for both parties. The city would get some land that would help it realign 101st Avenue because Montrose Avenue, the old one, was offset from 101 Ave. The city would also get some land that it could donate to Wapiti Dorm for the future emergency shelter that request came in for. Landsmen would benefit because their land would be consolidated because they owned the property that was south of Montrose Ave. And the entire area would essentially have improved marketability because the couplet that was going to be designed would drive a lot of traffic onto 101 Avenue and really spur on commercial development. However, since they made that agreement with the city, Landsman has experienced a number of hardships, mainly because a lot of these things didn't come to fruition. After giving away their parcel to Wapiti House, it took years for them to receive their parcel back in exchange, and we're talking like in excess of 5 years. Also, the couplet project ended up getting canceled. So instead of an arterial road being built, the city constructed something between like a collector road and a local road, because I think the front is a collector, but all connections are local roads. So it doesn't produce nearly the same commercial benefit as the couplet would have, and that's the way it was sold to them. Then there were a number of drainage issues that appeared after the reconfiguration of the area. And as stated in the report that you guys have, in 2011 and 2016, there were some attempts to address those issues. But there were also a lot of costs that ended up landing on the doorstep of Landsman Properties. So they had to put in their own money to deal with these drainage issues. And for a lot of these drainage issues, this was runoff from adjacent properties. The runoff from the Fletcher building, from Wapiti House, as they drain into the lane, and even part of City Hall. Part of the land drains down through the Fletcher building and onto that lane, and then subsequently onto Aberdeen property. So Aberdeen Centre, they're still managing multiple flooding issues on an annual basis on that northwest corner of their building, and also along the south side of their building, that parking lot area. They're still dealing with runoff that comes off of Wapiti House and ends up traveling through their parking lot. And you see the pictures in your report show how the pavement is eroding away because of the sheer volume of water that just constantly trickles through. And then we get to the social issues. So Wapiti House was definitely a great thing that was needed in the city, but Aberdeen Centre, they had to erect a fence around their property to address some of the safety issues that they were dealing with constantly. But then the fence was constantly being cut open because some of the clientele that utilize that facility have bolt cutters, and they just cut open the fence because they want to pass through. So they had to upgrade their fence to a steel fence, and that prevented it from being damaged. And since then, also the increase in clientele in Wapiti House, and now with the supervised consumption services, it's really created a massive problem of nuisance, loitering, vandalism, littering, increased crime, and just a lot of safety issues that they're forced to deal with. It really came to kind of a bad crescendo in 2019 when Tent City came about. Everyone was pretty shocked and devastated at the impact to the downtown core, but particularly these property owners in the area of Tent City, like Aberdeen Centre, suffered the most. The temporary emergency shelter, it's become a place for drug addicts to live permanently. And some of these people have major psychological problems on top of their addictions. And when they leave Wapiti House on a daily basis, they're forced to exit right out of the access and spill right into the Aberdeen Centre parking lot. That's just the way the site is physically laid out, which is why we came to the city a few months ago asking for that to be changed. So we appreciate that the city is trying to deal with the broader issue of street engaged people and homelessness, and we hope that you're successful. However, there's no guarantee for us that the intensity in this area will ever go down, given that opioid addictions are up, homelessness is up, and there's just this constant rise in this population. So even if the city is successful in managing the current situation, there's going to be a problem down the road as this problem gets bigger and bigger. We also see the city entertaining too many proposals in this area to increase the social service aspects, which has taken away the commercial viability of the area. So since the Wapiti dorm, I'm just going to give some examples. The city has approved a supervised consumption site. They approved Tent City to be a temporary thing, a street outreach facility, and a permanent supportive housing project. So that this area, which was originally slated to be to generate more commercial activity, has gone the other way. And we're trying to live in a world between social services and commercial viability, and you can't have both. As much as we'd like to see them coexist, it's very difficult. So Landsman Property has continued to suffer losses since making the deal with the city, and they've yet to be made whole from that agreement. They've been forced to spend a lot of their own money on security cameras, repairs, and building improvements just to try to mitigate some of the things that they've been experiencing. And they currently have full-time security now working in their building just to make the situation more tolerable. Last year, they were presented with some potential solutions, and they thought they were going to happen, but nothing has come from it yet. So we're here today. We're going to implore the city, as the landowner of Wapiti House and a major landowner of the entire area, to just implement some of the recommendations that are in that report today. The only issue that they have with that fencing recommendation is that we know the chain link fence, it just isn't going to hold. Aberdeen Centre tried that themselves, and they were forced to upgrade the fence to that black steel fence that you see over the chain link. So in closing, we just want to say that solutions need to be implemented to help Wapiti House coexist with the neighboring properties, because they do such great and much needed work in the city. But the effects from their clientele, they need to be addressed. We're also going to request that the city provide landsmen with a timeline for getting any of the recommendations that you approve here today completed, because they need to have some certainty that these things are going to be done and in short order. And we're going to ask that the city continue to work with landsmen in the future to address issues that are always evolving. So if we need to, down the road, adjust to the situation and look for either interim solutions or long-term solutions, we need to know that the city is willing to work with this property owner. So that's the end of my presentation. I want to thank you for your time. Dean, if you have anything to add, feel free. Otherwise, we are here to answer any questions that you might have.
I'd add a couple things. we were told last year about this time that the fence would be built between us and Wapiti House, and there would be an entrance on the south side of Wapiti House, and it would be done by the 1st of July. Well, that didn't happen, and then we were told it would be done by September. Well, here we are a year later, and nothing's happened. And since Tent City went in there a few years ago, we've lost 40% of our tenants. So it's really put a guy in a tough situation that there's barely enough rent there to look after all the expenses. So it would be very nice if a guy could get a fence put in and that entrance changed. I do think that would solve the biggest percentage of the problem.
That's it. Well, thank you so much for coming. Mayor Clayton, do you have any questions for the delegation?
Thanks, Chair Blackmore. Just more of a comment. Thank you for coming today. I do have questions for administration, but I'll wait till they make their presentation. I appreciate you coming and also being willing to have multiple conversations to find a solution. So thank you for that.
And Councillor Bressie?
Great. Yeah, thank you for coming in. First of all, I really appreciate the way that you're engaging us. There always is talk about not in our backyards when these things happen. I really appreciate that. That's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing, hey, let's make this work. And so thank you for the way you're engaging that. I think that's really awesome. And I often brag about our business community here in Grande Prairie and how to engage in social issues. And this is why I brag about our community. So thank you. Also, thank you for the history lesson. All of that happened before I even moved to Grande Prairie. So I was actually completely unaware of the land swap and all of that. And committee, I think something I hope committee will consider later when we get to talk about this is actually asking for a report on that so I can have that in writing so that I can make sure that's first and foremost in my mind, because that actually does change my thinking on a number of things here. Just 2 points of clarification I wanted to ask. You referenced when you're describing it Montrose Ave. I'm not actually familiar with what Montrose Ave was. I don't think it was named that by the time I moved here. Where was that?
So,
Yeah, it's right. Do you have the screen or the?
Oh, sorry, you're talking currently. Yeah.
no, it's been replaced now. So if you look at the Aberdeen Centre just immediately south of the building, that used to be the old Montrose Ave.
Gotcha.
And that land
Kind
was
of right where the blue line runs?
Yeah.
that land was swapped with where 101st Ave is now, just to realign the intersection and then to consolidate the land for Aberdeen Centre.
Gotcha. So that is where Montrose Ave always was, or gotcha, but it used to be just a more main road than it is now.
It used to be the main road that passed through the area.
Okay, great.
No 101st then, right?
Wow, I have troubles picturing that. I'm gonna have to go back and look at things again before my time. So thank you for that. And then last, just point of clarification is your request was implement the recommendations in that report was the language you used. I just want to confirm, is the report you're talking about the report that's actually in our agenda today, or is that another report you were referencing?
No, that the recommendations that are in this report. I know there's a lot of options, and how you decide on those options, I guess, is up to you guys. But some of them are really good. We're just looking for some kind of action because we've been talking about this for a long time. I've been personally working on the file for way too long, and we were promised that something was going to happen last year, and it didn't happen. And then we found out that it was never in the budget. So that's why we seemed like we had to start this process over again, and there was also a changeover in council.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Next is Councillor Berg.
Thank you, Chair Blackmore, and thanks, gentlemen, for coming today. So, Dan, you made a comment about that you have yet to be made whole. Is that outside of the recommendations?
No, I think, at some point, my clients here had to just accept the fact that the situation is what it is. They've constantly been in contact with the city back and forth over the entire process of this land swap deal. I'm just saying that they've always been on the wrong side of any of these issues that have cropped up. And every time they've talked to the city is, the majority of the time they've said, we don't have this in our budget, so here are some options, but if you want them implemented, you got to pay for them yourself, which is what they've done. I think it's just the city's turn to step up and do something, because this was supposed to be a collaborative effort at the beginning, and now all the negative impacts have fallen onto my clients. And I think it's just the city knows that, you know, these issues here aren't going to go away, and we're going to have to find a way to make it or set it up so that everyone can coexist.
Okay, so if we follow through with some of this, you would consider yourselves made whole then?
Yeah, I think if you follow through with that, and then, you know, just continue to work with them as new issues crop up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming today. I don't see anyone else in the queue, and so we'll move on to the administration report. And I was on council during the land swap, so I do remember that. I'm disappointed in myself that the couplet never took place, because that was an important part of that for you. That was a big deal, and also I believe that one day the couplet will take place just because of traffic flows, but that's a personal opinion. So I don't know, I could ask for some guidance here. Do I hand the chair over to Mr. Councillor O'Connor? Are you ready? Born ready. Okay, so thank you so much for coming, and Councillor O'Connor will ask administration to give their report.
Thank you.
Is there any actions? Do we need to have a motion? Okay. Go to we'll go to 3.3, correct? Oh, I see. Okay. Sorry. We will go to 3.1, Director Glavin's report.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. We'll start off in economic development. Welcomed 12 new businesses to the city between March 28th and April 10th. As well, our business retention expansion coordinator has been out meeting with businesses, 41 to be specifics. And the theme that's been emerging with it, the business, has been trouble recruiting staff, both skilled and unskilled workers, a number of supply chain issues, shipping delays, freight costs, and just generally the rising cost of goods. And I know that they're also working with some of our other partners on the workforce study that was just completed by the Chamber to help address some of those issues. As well, the Development Incentive Grant Program has received 2 new business revitalization grants this week, and the committee is meeting to deliberate on those. As well, the 2022 edition of the Grande Prairie Guide is in stock, and we have it at all of our city facilities for distribution, and as well, it's been distributed to the realtors and property management companies, and there's been good demand for that thus far. In energy and environment, approximately 1,000 people attended the Earth Day activities, and the Blair family won the e-bike, and they were very eager and happy to pick that up on the same day that they won it. As well, City Scrub officially begins on May 1st, although there have been many people out and about picking up garbage. Supplies can be picked up at City Hall, the Service Center, and Ernie Radbourne Pavilion. In engineering, we've posted tenders for the Stormline Cleaning and Inspection Program, the Bear River Control Structure Maintenance, the 2022 Traffic Signal Maintenance Work, Phase 2 of the 2022 Sidewalk Program, and have recently closed tenders for 116th Avenue Rail Crossing, drainage, catch basin installation, the 84th Avenue rehabilitation between 100th Street and Resources Road, as well as intersection improvement projects on 92nd Street and 108th Street. In transportation, our spring cleanup continues on Priority 1 and 2 roads, with concrete boulevards and islands are approximately 90% complete, and we've also started cleaning off the grassed boulevards you would have seen on Resources Road the last couple days if you're heading south of the city, that they are active there. Residential is planned to start right after May long weekend if everything stays on track. In parks, we have all of our seasonal staff starting next week, and initial tasks will be the orientation and training, and then litter pickup with the intent to start downtown on May 3rd. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, any questions for Director Glavin? Seeing none, we will move on to 3.2, Aberdeen Centre.
Through the chair.
Go ahead.
So at the February 15th committee meeting, administration was directed to bring back a report with options, including pricing for the for concerns presented by the delegation, and report back to future standing committee. So that was the motion. And so at that February meeting, the delegation, which was you just saw, representing Aberdeen Centre, presented 2 figures and spoke to concerns regarding the storm drainage and Wapiti House accesses. So these figures are part of your report and actually up on the screen, which is excellent. So on review, so this, here, let me just get myself organized, sorry. So the figure 1, which is this top one, shows the concerns about the drainage. And so the blue lines is where the drainage currently goes based on the information provided. And they were suggesting that rerouting it or diverting it as per the orange was an option that they felt should be reviewed. So looking at the 97A Street, which this is 97A Street, it does, if we were to put a hump, an asphalt hump in this area, we would be able to redirect it. I met with Robert Carroll to review what was needed, and he felt that using city resources, that could be done this summer. I then met with the Aberdeen representatives to discuss this asphalt hump and this option, and they indicated support for doing that. So I think we're clear on our direction to resolving this issue here. The other drainage concern that was expressed was regarding the lane located on the north side of the building, and we were not able to identify any immediate solutions to divert the flows in the lane. The slope and the sidewalk adjacent to the property, although not the ideal slope we would use for something new, on the surface they do appear to work. So we do know there is some ponding that occurs in the lane, and it does appear that the main issue is infiltration into the building. So it's not that it's running across the surface and going into the building that we can directly see and address. It's more of that the water's going perhaps through cracks in concrete and making its way into the groundwater and then infiltrating into the building somehow. So based on my field conversations, we just didn't have any solutions. I guess the one solution that is in the report, if we were to eliminate all ponding in the lane, we would need to bring in a storm sewer and then rebuild this portion of the lane, which is quite a costly option to do. And so the recommendation is that we continue to work with Aberdeen to try and really address issues. Right now, we work really hard with them to make sure there's no ice buildup in this lane, because if we get ice buildup, that creates additional ponding during those freeze thaws. So we know we have to stay on top of this. And although, again, not the ideal solution, there is hope that perhaps in the next few years, if we come along with a capital project for 98th, then at that point, when we're doing this larger capital, we could bring in the storm sewer and we could do other work to try and improve this area further. So moving on to figure 2. Figure 2, which was brought forward, shows concerns related to access to the Wapiti House. I reviewed options and costs to change both vehicle and pedestrian access to Wapiti House. And Schedule F, Option 1 in your package, which, sorry, I'm going to get down to give you a very thorough package of photos for this area. So this is the Schedule F, Option 1, and it shows the driveway relocated to the east, and it shows a sidewalk installation picking up from the para ramps at 101st Ave. And then it shows fencing extended. Now, I assumed that this is a metal fence along the lane. The fence between the two properties is still chain link. So I assumed that it would be a chain link fence that was extended down. It would need to be perhaps moved back to the line better so it's not in front of the sign for Wapiti House. They didn't want their sign blocked by a fence, so we'd have to adjust it, but the concept is still consistent. Aberdeen felt that this would achieve their goals. Wapiti House indicated they're not opposed to these changes, but they have no funding to do the work. So it is recommended that the report be accepted for information. If there is a desire to assist Wapiti House with the access changes, Council can direct administration to bring forward a request to the 2023 budget deliberations, if that was the direction requested.
Okay, are there any questions? I've got Councillor Laners, Councillor Blackmore, Councillor Bressie.
So we're looking at that. I think that one asphalt swale up in the corner there. That seems to that's an easy fix. I'm just curious. I don't know what that parking lot, how it runs east of the Aberdeen there. Is if you did a similar kind of thing, I know it requires some cooperation from the owner, but is that a possibility? Like if you directed that lane water to the east side of to the parking lot, would that help them alleviate some of their water problems that they're getting? I don't know if the water even runs that way, but does anyone know? You know,
I visited the site. Sorry, I visited the site yesterday and did a walk around. The very on the north side, if you could put up that picture of the, yes, if you take a look where the blue arrows are, that whole lane is gravel in the back, so I don't see why we couldn't take a look at and maybe ask administration to look at, can we tie a catch basin in that lane? But that's not my role, but I'm just asking if we could direct administration to do that. There is a kind of a curb that the metal fence goes along, and it, I think they created kind of a berm with the footing on there to stop water from coming through. So I think, John, I think we could add a swale through the middle of the parking lot, but I'm not sure if that's feasible or not.
yeah, that's not what I'm asking for, Mike.
Okay.
I'm just seeing if there's any. Well, it requires a few things, but I don't even know if the water across that. And I see Dan over there is twitching. So does the does the water in that parking lot drain north to south? And if it doesn't, like we could run a catch basin, but I've already seen in the report it's going to cost $250,000. That's a pretty big rat to swallow. So
It is a north to south slope across that parking lot.
and maybe that's an option. I don't know. Is it an option? Looking down there.
Christine?
So through the chair, we did look at all the contours and the grades in this area and what is public property versus private. And really there is no other way to drain that lane other than the catch basin. As far as the parking lot that's immediately east of the Aberdeen, that is the Aberdeen parking lot. And they have not expressed concern with their parking lot coming down to the front. So they've only expressed concern to us about the lane and what was coming from this 97A Street. So the waters from the parking lot do come down. In the photos, you can see how they do follow there's a gutter kind of on either side of it, and there's a catch basin down closer to the building on that southwest corner that captures all that water. And it does, from the photos and everything, work well.
Yeah, no, I know that. I guess the problem is it's going to the corner of the Aberdeen where it comes onto 98th Street. So if you were to put up another one of those little asphalt berms, we'll call it, for lack of a better way, bumps at the back end of the supportive housing, and then direct that water south across, and maybe they'll want to grant an easement. I don't know if they're worried about water in the problem. Otherwise, we're trying to fix a 40-year-old problem. So that was probably there before the Aberdeen problem. So I don't know. That's just people cooperating. Maybe that works. I don't know. Some of the options in that area are pretty expensive. So I'm just grasping, and I'm sure you've looked at all that. I'm just curious. That's all. So that was my question on that one.
Okay, and Councillor Blackmore.
Ms. Donnelly, I have two questions. One, regarding the drainage, have you done any preliminary estimates of costs if you were to try and address the alley?
Go ahead.
Through the chair? Yes, we did. Now, to make any improvements there, we would need to extend a storm sewer and install a catch basin, and the estimate is $250,000 for that work. Now, that the storm sewer currently is in the middle of the two of the southbound lanes, so we would be having to go back to that and dig down. We'd probably have to close off the majority, all of the road, definitely all the northbound lanes, and possibly we could keep one possible southbound, and then have to excavate across, extend the storm sewer, dig up the alleyway. There's substantial work. There's a retaining wall for Fletcher Building, which is located in the alleyway, which would have to be removed and relocated. And then there is the estimate. We do have, we were able to approach Helix Engineering because they had done a design for this for the Fletcher Building, and we were able to access them and their design and their cost estimate, and that was what was provided.
Okay. So pricey, but really a lot of work besides that. So I'll move on to the pedestrian traffic then. Did you do any pricing to move the road and put up the fencing?
Through the chair? Yeah, sorry. When I was going through my presentation, I skipped over that. So the work that's estimated for that Schedule F Option 1, that I can go down there again. Oops. For this one here, the estimate that's in the report is $69,500. That was based on a chain length, and it is order of magnitude because I don't have a design, but it seemed like it'd be in that kind of range of $69,500.
Okay, and I have one further question. This is okay?
Okay, only one.
Only one. If you put this new access point in, will it change any future potential for the couplet to eventually be redesigned and breathed into new life and take place? Eventually, if that couplet had to take place, would this alignment be detrimental to that or insignificant?
Go ahead.
Through the chair, there's much broader issues than this access to try and bring back the couplet. Now that we've done the rehab of 101st downtown, we've changed that design in a manner that I don't know how feasible. We definitely can take a look at that and let you know if you wish to pursue that direction. I think that it could work with the couplet. You can sort of see the line work. It's hard to see, but there's the curve here that was the couplet. We would have to bring it in at 90 degrees, but I'm sure this driveway could be accommodated.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blackmore. And then Councillor Bressy.
Great, thank you. a question about the drainage. Is your understanding that the big issue is the piles that are illustrated melting, or is there issue during rain events as well?
Go ahead.
So through the chair, I'm sure that Aberdeen Centre representatives could answer a bit better, but my understanding is that the groundwater and is things getting through cracks and sitting in the area is creating this infiltration. So therefore, the snow piles, if they're saturating into the ground, they could be contributing to the problem. Versus if there's just a major storm event on the surface and that quickly flows across, that should work. It's when things start ponding, allowing for infiltration is my understanding of what I'm hearing.
So maybe this is a stupid question, but have we, I know moving snow isn't cheap, but it sounds a lot cheaper than some of the other options we're looking at. Have we looked at potentially helping move that snow as a solution to this, instead of just letting it melt there?
Go ahead.
That wasn't something that I really looked at. I know that that Wapiti House had been requested to remove, and I think they had tried to remove some of their snow. I'm not familiar if there's been conversations with Fletcher about them doing it or us doing it on their behalf. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. And then I've got a question about the fence too. Would you like me to ask it
I
now or
have
come
another
back?
person in the queue, and then I'll come back to you. Mayor Clayton.
Just my question about the fence was, I was under the impression that fence was getting built too, and I'm kind of surprised that it doesn't appear to be on the books anymore, but also completely open to maybe just my recollections off. Could somebody from administration just give me the history about, did we promise a fence at some point, or where have our conversations with that fence been?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Director Manuel.
yeah. Through the chair, I can take that. So the budget's allocated in capital plan for fencing. However, the fencing to have any true effect has to go across that access. Otherwise, it's not going to make any difference. So until the access issue is addressed, the fencing just needs to stand by.
Okay, but there is money for the fencing. There's no money for the access currently allocated.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mayor Clayton.
Thanks for that. Ms. Donnelly, can you tell me, you mentioned that the funding for the asphalt hump can be addressed within transportation operating budget in 2022. Before I make some motions, the concrete, that doesn't include the concrete swale, does it?
Go ahead.
Through the chair, we looked at the two options, concrete swale or the asphalt.
It's one or the other.
Just one or the other, and the asphalt seems to work, and it seems to be acceptable to Aberdeen Centre. So I think that would be the better option to start with, and
then all of the other options with fencing and site access would be could be potentially approved this fall budget and executed in 2023
yes, and that
operating season.
sorry, yes, and my estimate's not in my report, but if you total it up, it was that 69,500.
Sorry, so clarify that for me, because I'm looking at your budget estimates, and in the fencing and site access, none of those numbers equal 69 to me. So which?
So
Go ahead.
through the chair, I included the 3,000 because we have to address the legal
Yep.
situation for vehicles turning around. I included the 34,000 for the access on the east side. I included 27,000 for the concrete sidewalks, pedestrian improvements, and then I included 5,500 for fencing. So if we already have the fencing, you could take that number, that 5,500 out.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I just have a comment just for clarification. I thought there was the metal fence along the east line of the property. I think it is there? Go ahead.
So through the chair, along the lane, you're correct, that is the metal. Running north-south between Wapiti House and the parking lot is a chain link.
Okay.
So perhaps they started with chain link and the one portion they were changed out was along the laneway.
So just a clarification question. On your drawing there, you show the black chain line fence. That road and the property where the sidewalk is, who owns that?
Just through the chair.
Go to your left.
Yeah. So the road right away currently follows and curves down. That was registered based on the old design of the couplet. So anything that's registered east of 97A Street as road was based on an old concept. I would recommend that we close that. In fact, I think we should have done the road closure bylaw when we decided to not pursue that, and that we then need to determine how best we want this area to be redeveloped. And then once we've determined that, then we register the new road right away at that time. But we own the land of Wapiti House as well. So I did have a diagram in the report that shows all of the land that is currently owned by the city. So all the road right-of-ways are owned, and then there's several lots that are owned.
Okay. Councillor Bosch, then Mayor Clayton.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connor. Sorry for being late. We were at another meeting, but I did want to bring up a couple comments to this. One, that I am absolutely in favor of getting this new access in, as far as, on my opinion, and take that for what it's worth, but I think it's necessary. My question is this 34,000 will not be throwaway dollars if we go and continue with the road in the future. Correct?
Go ahead.
So through the chair, depending on how the area is to be redeveloped, this would not be throwaway. It does determine when we look at redevelopment that it does suggest that 101st would be extended straight out and then hit it. So perhaps a portion of this driveway would be throwaway at that point, but it's
Nothing
pretty
significant.
simple. Yeah, it's more just a gravel with asphalt, so there's no curb and gutter or anything proposed here. This is a pretty simple.
So secondary to that, the sidewalk connections, is that necessary prior to us deciding what we're going to do with that road? Is that something we have to do in this concept to get this done, or can that wait till we decide on the actual development of that road?
Ms. Bromley.
Through the chair. So just looking at the monitor, we have sidewalks coming up on either side of 101st Ave with para ramps at these two locations. So currently someone with mobility issues accessing Wapiti House would come down on 97A Street and use it to get in to it. So if we don't provide these sidewalks, they would then have to come down this old portion of this road here. It's in really poor shape, and it's quite a bit longer distance for someone, perhaps in a wheelchair, to have to go down, up, and around. So from a mobility and accessibility for pedestrians, I would recommend this concrete, regardless of what happens with the access, to be honest.
Okay. No, that was my question, if that was, if there was a different way for them, or if, and the need, right? So, one need is a need, so I can appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Clayton.
Thanks. Ms. Donnelly, a couple things. So you suggested that this could come back to fall budget in discussion in the fall, but for the construction season of 2023, tell me what can't happen this year, regardless of, council can figure out where the funding source is. Tell me what can't happen this year of the suggested. So the asphalt hump can happen. Obviously, the registration can happen. The pedestrian access, the fence. Can those things happen this year if council chooses to fund them?
Ms. Bromley.
Through the chair, they could all happen this year if you chose to fund them. I don't know if these were estimated costs using unit rates we get on bigger projects, so the costs might come in higher because we've already
It could come in higher in the fall budget time too, regardless.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. So Director Manuel, remind me what you just said a minute ago about there is a capital budget line for this fence. Is that what you said?
Yeah, and actually, the capital funds we have allocated, I believe, are $40,000. So there is potential where if the fencing, if we went with the chain link, we do have funds that could potentially do the higher grade as well. But if you look at the sidewalk cost, for instance, that might help offset if council were to redirect some of that slippage.
Okay, so Ms. Donnelly, the reference keeps going back to chain link fence, which I agree with the delegation earlier. Chain link in that area is potentially not what we need. Was there any consideration or cost estimates for other alternative fencing besides chain link?
Through the chair, I did not look into it. We don't have unit rates in the projects that we're doing, so I was not able to look at it. But I would suspect that you're probably looking at least double if you go up to the galvanized, the metal or.
Okay, so I just want some clarification. You have money, you can do the asphalt hump, so there's check that box. You need $3,000 for the legal piece. We have $40,000 for fencing, and you need at the high end $7,500, so you're good there. You need $27,000 for pedestrian access and $34,000 for vehicle access. Are those the two buckets you need funded? $34,000 and $27,000 for these items to take place this year?
Through the chair, that was the estimate that's been provided.
Sure.
High level estimate.
Okay. So who's chair? Mr. Chairman, if no one else has other comments, I'm prepared to make some motions.
Okay, you're in order.
All right. What a surprise. I would move that direct administration to come back with funding options to complete. And I mean, well, I don't know. Director Manuel, would you prefer that I suggest a funding option right now, or would you like to come back with suggestions? What did I call you? Sorry. Director Glavin.
Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. Yeah, it might be appropriate for us to come back with funding options. I'm kind of looking over at Director Trim if she has anything in particular that she would suggest on this front.
Perfect.
Okay. Ms. Donnelly, do you have any comments?
Just to add, yeah, there are probably a few different alternatives, but I would suggest we connect with the CFO and come back with a report as to what those funding sources could look like.
Sure. Okay, so my concern being timely, right? So if we're going to get this stuff, so my motion will be to direct administration to come back with funding options to, in order to complete the asphalt hump, Schedule D, Schedule E, Schedule G, Option 1, for pedestrian access and fencing, Schedule G. That one, I don't see an option that I'm really looking for. So with that report for funding options, can you come back with an alternative fencing solution that is superior than chain link? Also with that, can we as requested by the delegation, can we put some timelines on those? Like, when do we think that the asphalt hump will get completed, and just some rough timelines of estimates of when this work in the 2022 season will be completed. So they have some, obviously they need to let their tenants know the work that's happening around their building, et cetera. So if we can get some timelines on that as well. Thanks. So 3 things, I guess. Funding source, all superior fencing options, and timelines for the project. Nope. All right, that's good. My motion, but
No, are there any other comments? I don't see the motion listed on the screen, so are there any other questions? The only one that I had is this. I apologize for being late. I did not have a ride to come back to the meeting, so apologize to the delegation. Anyway, just want to know if we've met most of the concerns that the delegation brought forward. That's the only thing before. Could someone comment on that, please?
Yes. The only addition as opposed to the recommendations from the report was a timeline.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll call the question. Whoops,
I got a question still. No, I got a question before we.
Okay.
So are we doing anything on the north lane as part of this motion?
Not as part of this motion.
Okay. I'll be calling for something afterwards. Go ahead, call the question.
Mayor Clayton's in favor.
That was carried unanimously. And Councillor Laners,
No, I asked my question already.
did you want to direct?
No.
No. Okay. Councillor Blackmore.
I don't know how to say this. Ms. Donnelly or Mr. Glavin, have we any indication that there will be a development permit coming forward on Fletcher House that will affect drainage in the alley?
Ms. Donnelly, Mr. Glavin, Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. I know that the building, the Fletcher building, was up for sale. If it does sell and they do redevelop it and change the use, there would be a development permit that would be required for that. And if there were any impacts, anything from that development that would need to be addressed from a drainage perspective, that would likely be a condition.
So if, for example, they took the backyard of the building and turned it into parking, that would be an opportunity to address drainage in the area?
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. That would be correct. They would have to address any of those impacts.
Thank you.
I love the way you think. Thank you. With that, if there's no other questions or concerns, I'd like to move on. We have a busy agenda, so and there are no motions required. Everything's good. Okay, we'll go to 3.3.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. The December 7th, 2021 committee meeting, administration was directed to investigate regulatory requirements, timelines, and preliminary costs to implement a micro hydro generation system that incorporates the existing reservoir and dam structure in Muskogee Park. So I'm now reporting this back. So the Bear River, or Bear Creek, a reservoir and dam was built in 1948, reconstructed in 1978. It was constructed originally to provide drinking water. Sorry, I scrolled down too quick. Okay, there we are. Administration manages the flow during the spring and summer months to ensure the health of the aquatic system downstream. The current flow regime meets the conditions outlined in the city's Water Act approval. Administration reviewed the regulatory requirements to install microhydro at the spillway. The Alberta Utilities Commission considers microhydro as any site that uses renewable or alternative energy sources and that is less than 5 megawatts. The spillway uses approximately 250 kilowatt hours annually. So the low energy consumption at this site eliminates microhydro classification under the regulations. An alternative approach is distribution connected generation under the Electric Utilities Act. This would mean that we would have to approach ATCO for approval to connect to the wires, and they would determine the volume of energy that could be generated at that site. So we also conducted energy modeling on low carbon energy planning and implementation with two options, the run-of-river impound and impoundment. They're in your report, the figures. We did an exhaustive review of the run-of-river, and and we looked at a similar project called Riverbank Hydro in the UK, and it had similar flows. We did the project, the Riverbank project, experienced challenges with seasonality, very similar to this, the Bear Creek, the seasonality piece. Hydro generation electricity does decrease greenhouse gas emissions and is a positive environmental impact. However, the emissions factor in the construction of any infrastructure option will generate high GHG emissions. So the big thing here is the financial implications. The cost for the Riverbank Hydro project was roughly at $1.5 million Canadian. A similar type of project here would be in the vicinity of $2 million. However, that does not include dredging that would be required to occur at this site to redirect the water flow. Administration modeled the energy generation, and we felt that this project could generate $10,000 a year. So the average cost to construct an energy project in Alberta ranges from $1 million to $1,500 a kilowatt. This project would cost approximately $13,500 a kilowatt. So we've researched possible micro-hydro generation options on the Bear River. The research included preliminary discussions with provincial and federal regulatory agencies and a thorough review of regulatory documents, reports, studies. And at this point, we are recommending that you receive this report for information.
Any questions, Councillor Laners?
Well, Michelle, that was an awesome report. So, you know, sometimes you don't know, right? So it was obviously, I think you've come to a conclusion. You had me with $10,000 a year. I said that's not going to make any. It's not going to make any sense. You could have probably stopped there, but you learned a lot, I hope, and I learned a lot. And you know, there are some things that you know, where it might make sense, because I know we've looked at asking Equiterre to look at that, and that's a little different situation. That's lines already in place, 140 meters ahead, blah blah blah, and with an active internal use and all those kinds of things. So hopefully some of those learnings will we can share or help them, or you know, make us, you know, make some decisions on that later on. So I'm not going to belabor this any longer. Thank you very much for looking into that. Now I can sleep at night, and so I'd like to make the motion that we accept this report for information.
Thank you. That motion is in order. Oh, sorry, I had. Okay, yes, Councillor Blackmore after the motion. That was carried. Thank you. And Councillor Blackmore.
Yes, my questions are not pertinent to the motion, but I feel, and I know other people in the room have occasionally mentioned this, that the reservoir is a very good recreational opportunity for the city, and every year it fills in slightly more with silting. I know the cost of dredging, I just learned this today, the cost of dredging the reservoir would be about $50 million, which seems unbelievable, but there we go. However, I've also come across ideas where we just dredge out the water flow, the creek bed of the reservoir, and I'm wondering if we have any idea what that would cost, and if we did, if there would be any benefit to the city in maintaining the river channel, opening the river channel more, any recreational or otherwise.
Okay.
Chair O'Connell, we actually have an expert here, and I would call on Richard Sally to help address this question.
You may approach if you would like to come up and grab a mic at the front, introduce yourself. You can pull that towards you if you want.
I think I can. Thank you. So previously in 2012, we had, Richard Sully, I'm the Development Engineering and Storm Drainage Manager with the City of Grande Prairie with engineering services. But previously in 2012, the city had done a reservoir feasibility study that discussed different options for the reservoir. At that time, dredging the entire reservoir was one of them. Doing a kind of run of the river type system, something similar to what you're talking about now, in dredging just that kind of channel, leaving it as is and just kind of removing the gates and letting it run as it was. So at those times, or back in 2012, I believe the estimates were quite a bit less, but with inflation and then other regulations that have come into play, that's what has driven the cost of dredging it up. At the time when we had done, essentially we had designed from that or gotten a feasibility to expand the river flow and then kind of create another channel around the other side. I believe that one was in the neighborhood of around $6 million, but with the current regulations, it hasn't been something that we've looked at more recently. So just to do the channel itself, not sure. There's a cost there.
Follow up, go ahead.
So my follow-up question is, what regulations have changed? Like, is it a Department of Fisheries change, or is there some environmental change that would push the cost up or make it less feasible?
Through the chair.
Go ahead.
So the regulations, most of it stems with the work that would be done just enhancing that, I guess that stream or that river. With who owns, I guess, bed and shore, there would be more work directly in that bed and shore, and there is significantly more regulations in dealing with DFO and the protection of aquatic species and life within there. Also, since with AEP and there have been regulations. I believe it was in 2016 that their regulations were in. They brought in new ones that have just it's just to do with the construction methods and in the handling of the material, and then the protection of aquatic species. The environment.
Let's go.
Sorry.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 3.4, geometric upgrades. And if I could say your name right this time, Miss Donnelly, I'd be really great. And introduce.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Andrew Booth, and I'm a project technologist with the City of Grande Prairie in the engineering services. I'm here to talk about 132 Avenue and 97 Street. This project began several years ago. At the time, City Council did allocate some funding for that project. Since then, we have purchased land from all four corners of that, and we have a tender that is ready to go. So, after having said all that, the cost estimate came back that we are needing additional funding. So we recommend that the committee and council reallocate an additional $700,000 from MSI to go towards this project.
Okay, just a clarification, I see in the report 600,000 additional. Did that change of 100,000 not be reflected? Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, thank you. Okay. So 688 is what I see the shortfall at the very bottom. Correct? So we need a motion then. Is that, or are there any questions first? Councillor Bosch, then Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. I guess my question is, That's a significant ask. That's over double of what you've already put in. What is the changes from 2016 to now that is drastically changed this cost?
Back in 2016, they made assumptions about how much this project would cost. Now that we have a final design, now we know more, so we have more information, and this is just how the dollars and cents comes out with the quantities and the scope of work.
So assumptions, okay, awesome. I guess my follow-up question is, if lights are not new, putting in lights to any part of the city, how was previous history not a qualifier to what this cost might be? Does that make sense? I'm curious, if we've put lights in other parts of the city and we know how much that costs, how can we be this far out on this?
Okay, Ms. Donnelly.
Thanks. Through the chair. Back in 2016, when we put the capital budget together, we used an average number that we were experiencing for traffic signals. Back then, we used to also have another pot for geometric upgrades, which we still do have, but we were combining them, utilizing them a bit differently back then. And this project includes quite a bit more geometric upgrades. I share my screen if you want for the site plan, but you can see that there's right turn lanes and there's a bunch of things like that. Those are above and beyond geometric upgrades that we see in our typical one. And so in addition, when we got to this one, we found there's a lot of utilities and other issues that have just really made it a much more complex and much more expensive. And so you're right, I guess when we do look at our capital, when we're thinking really far out, we maybe should have, instead of an average number, we should try and dial them in a bit closer. It just reflects back to when this is quite an old budget request that we did.
I really appreciate that answer. That is every bit of the question that is answered in that statement. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bosch. Before I go to Councillor Blackmore, we have to understand that this is a very complex, if you take a look on the map that's there, it's very complex. It's not like just putting lights in. So just want to make sure you're understanding that. Councillor Blackmore.
My question is for Ms. Donnelly. Is the cost exacerbated by this type of traffic going through this intersection, in that there's an industrial section immediately to the north side of the street?
Through the chair, yeah, that's a good question. Because we were adding all these lanes, the structures that would have been built would have been based on the traffic that's there. So yeah, that is definitely a likely contributor to the whole situation of using an average number wasn't right for this location.
Thank you. Mayor Clayton, and then Councillor Burke.
Thanks, Chair O'Connor. I think this question is probably best answered by Director Trim. You know, as the funding source being suggested coming from MSI, rather than a transportation levy or other reserves, am I to assume then that there aren't other projects that are getting pushed aside out of potential that also would be eligible for MSI funding? Can you give me, I know it's really early in the year for that sort of conversation, but can you give me anything that indicates any projects that maybe are getting chosen to be funded through MSI over other projects besides this one?
Your assumption is correct that the approval of this item would not negatively impact other projects that are in the queue.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Berg. And we have, okay.
Okay, thank you, Chair O'Connor. From the diagram, it looks like each of the four corners, there's some editing on some fence lines. Is land acquisition part of this as well?
Correct.
Go ahead.
Sure. Yes, land acquisition has taken place.
Okay, so it's already taken place. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Mayor, were you back in the queue? Are you okay? Okay, Councillor Laners, then Councillor Bressy.
Yeah, a couple of little things here. So I assume that like purchasing of the land was included in the construction in that pricing, the overall construction costs, or is that a separate item?
Through the chair.
Go ahead.
Land acquisition costs are not included in these values in this report.
Really? Roughly how much was land acquisition? I'm just trying to get a sense for the whole project cost.
I don't.
You don't know?
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, just for clarification, he's asking how much extra do you think it would cost for taking this extra land, so we know the overall budget.
Well, you've obviously paid for the land, right? So subdivisions and all that kind of stuff. I'm just curious if that was added. And just not if it's not. It's just that it's odd that these projects don't include that land cost. That just seems.
Yeah, Director Clavin.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. I don't have the exact values of any of those costs. So one of the things that changed a number of years ago is that we started budgeting for land acquisition separately in the capital budget. And so what has happened is we have our land officer goes out and tries to acquire the land prior to these things going out and getting designed. Well, in this case, the design was already in progress, but essentially it's a separate process now.
Okay, so there's a separate budget item for all of that kind of good stuff. And explain to me again, and it's a little bit dovetailing on the mayor's question, why this would go under MSI. I didn't know we had a whole bunch extra in there, but that's just me being new, and as opposed to transportation levy, because it's obviously some kind of an arterial upgrade, and you've already budgeted some out of transportation levy, so I'm not sure why the rest of it's not coming out of that fund, or maybe there isn't anything in that fund. Just looking for some clarification.
Go ahead, Ms. Donald.
Just through the chair, the majority of this project is funded by the transportation offsite levy. We do typically try and have other funding in the mix because the levy can only be utilized for the costs associated to growth and the expansion. And so when we go through, we are doing a bit more work with the existing asphalt and things like that. So it is beneficial to have the two funds in there. That's what you will normally see on our capital projects.
Yep, thank you. That's a good answer.
Okay. Councillor Bressy, then Mayor Clayton.
Thank you. I was going to ask the exact same question Councillor Laners just asked, so I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Clayton.
Thank you. So, Chair O'Connor, so based on the initial allocation of $1.1 million coming from transportation levy, now we've gone to tender, we've come back, realized that we're almost $700,000 short. Is it fair to say, and I guess a question for Ms. Director Trim, if we weren't $700,000 short, we wouldn't be using all our MSI allocation?
I'm just hearing from the CFO here that we would be using all of the MSI allocation for 2023.
Okay. I think I get it. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Laners.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd question. It's late in my life. So in terms of I'm just trying to see. It just seems like it's out there. I was going to try and figure out how this fit in the priority scheme of capital projects, but yeah, that's a hard question. So I'll leave it like that because it's a different question. Sorry about that.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Blackmore would like to make a motion.
I would move that committee recommend council reallocate an additional $700,000 from the Municipal Sustainability Initiative to the 132nd Avenue and 99th Street geometric upgrades and traffic signals capital project.
Okay, that motion is in order, but is that a comment, Mayor Clayton? Go ahead.
The difference between the shortfall and the 700 is just estimate? So I would like to amend the motion. We never have extra money to spend. We would always tender with what we assume the shortfall is. If the tenders come back higher than what we've allocated, then we can have that discussion. But to give anybody a thought that there's more money to be made doesn't seem fair to me. So I'll amend the motion to be 688, 684 and 87 cents. Thanks.
Okay, you go with that amendment? Yes? Okay, we'll call the question on the amendment.
Is it an official amendment?
I love a friendly amendment. Yeah. So when you're ready, we'll call the question. Carried. Thank you very much. We will go to item 3.5, Stormwater Utility. You have approximately 3 minutes, Rory, and that's it. Go ahead, Mr. Charette.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. So before you, you have a report on the stormwater utility. So this has been an item that's been discussed for some time. It was a carryover from the previous council. Yeah. So this was brought up at a previous committee meeting, Infrastructure and Economic Development Committee meeting of the previous council, and administration was asked to explore the implementation of a stormwater utility that would shift the funding of the stormwater system from the general tax base to a separate utility in which users are billed on a separate basis. Over the last couple of years, administration has done a lot of work on this file and looking at a number of different models and looking at the impacts of the various models on different property owners. And today we are here to ask whether this council would like to continue development of these models, and if so, which models you'd like to see further development on, as well as public consultation. So with that, there has been two general models that have been developed up to this point. There's obviously lots of variations within them, but on a general basis, we have the impervious surface area model, in which properties would be charged based on how much impervious surface area that they have, how much area that water does not readily absorb in. There's a number of pros and cons to having that impervious surface model. It is the most accurate model in terms of if you're trying to allocate the cost of all your stormwater system to users. This is one of the most accurate ways to do it, being that the amount of runoff that is generated by a property contributes to how much the cost of that service is to that property. And so by implementing a fee that charges on that basis, it is more equitable and fair in terms of allocating the actual cost for that service. We do have, there's a number of other benefits to have this. One of them is that it can, when you have a stormwater system like this, we can implement a credit system for property owners who choose to partake in environmentally productive or solutions to stormwater management. So whether that's on-site retention or bioswales or having green roofs, we could implement a credit system that would be available to property owners for them to benefit from that. Another benefit of a stormwater system is that there are currently a number of properties within the city that are tax exempt. so they do not pay any for any municipal services. This would be one way for dollars to be generated on those properties, and they would be able to contribute to one piece of city services, in that they would, on their utility bill, they would see a stormwater fee, and whereas right now we're paying through just general taxes. So on the model that's been developed with the impervious surface area, sorry, I'll just back up one second. So with the right now, working with engineering, we've estimated that the requisition that we would need for our stormwater system, going forward over the next few years, is between $7.5 and $8 million. So these models have been developed with a $7.7 million requisition needed. So under the impervious model, if that $7.7 million was requisitioned, it would mean that a stormwater fee would be applied per meter squared of impervious surface area on all commercial and multifamily properties. So it works out to be 64 cents, which sounds like a bargain there, but it's, depending on the size of the property and the amount of impervious area, it could be, if you have a small downtown business, it could be quite small. If you have a large sprawling lot with, significant impervious surface area, it could be, a larger fee. Some of the challenges with impervious surface area on the residential is that there's quite a large administrative burden to track all the impervious surface area on the 26,000 residential properties we have. So how most municipalities that have this type of stormwater system go about charging the stormwater fee is that a lot of them do it just on a building footprint area. So rather than tracking how much exactly you have on your driveway, and if you've added decks and sometimes trampolines or different things that are in the yard, that can make it a challenge to decide how much impervious. It's just easier to charge it on the building footprint, and so that's what we've provided there as the least administrative burden under the impervious model. So one of the challenges with the impervious model, obviously, it's a departure from our current way of funding the system with just based on our assessment and just being paid through the general tax base. So moving to this model, you will see some properties that would have a much greater impact on them in terms of the net impact on their fee. So like I said, a large property with significant surface area, so large parking lots and a large building footprint, are going to pay a much higher stormwater fee, and in some cases that may be significantly more than the taxes they are currently paying. On the flip side, there are some properties that would have a much smaller footprint, something like the 214 Place or a large apartment building, where they would have a smaller footprint, and the stormwater charge might be smaller than the average taxes that they would be, sort of the net tax impact that they would have on this system. So that is one of the drawbacks of the impervious, is that initially you would have this, it would be a big change for some property owners in terms of the net impact. Moving into the assessment model. So right now we do have, it's based on assessment, and the assessment model would continue that. So you would just pay a mill rate, and it would just show up on a separate bill. So in effect, you would take, say, 1 mil off of your tax rate, or sort of your municipal tax bill, and that would be placed on your stormwater bill. In that case, the net impact to properties is significantly less. It would, be just shifting it, what you're paying now, to shifting it over to tax bill. So you're not going to see the variability in the tax changes. What we've also provided, though, under this model is that you would still, to make it a little bit more accurate, is to have some sort of impervious surface area modifier. So where you look at the total impervious surface area of an entire category. So looking at the entire surface area of all of commercial and multifamily properties, and then basing that, and then looking at the impervious area on residential, and looking at that ratio, which right now that ratio is 68% and 32%, and then splitting the whole stormwater utility requisition based on that ratio. So taking that $7.7 million, 5.2 would be applied to commercial and multifamily properties, and 2.5 would be put on residential properties. So the net impact to individual properties is, the variability there isn't that great, but as a whole, there'd be a little, a small shift towards commercial and a small decrease on residential based on the fact that the ratio of impervious surface area between commercial and residential is much greater, weighted much greater towards the commercial. So obviously this model it's less accurate in terms of allocating the stormwater costs in that you're not evaluating the impacts on specific properties, right? So you're just looking at commercial properties as a whole. And so we're not looking at this dealership or this retail store, what is the exact footprint. We're just saying commercial properties as a whole need to be paying 68% of the stormwater charge, and we're going to allocate that based on our mill rate, and that will be applied that way. So the advantage of this one again is that it's less variability in terms of the net tax impact to the various properties. However, it is less accurate in allocating the costs from specific properties to the system. The third model is a transition starting with the assessment based, which has a less of an impact in terms of the net tax impact to properties, so that there's a shift to begin that initially, and then transitioning more towards an impervious service model over time. That would give time to develop the system a little bit more to get people used to paying, their stormwater costs on a separate bill, and then for those properties that are, on the outer margins, that would see the bigger impacts, whether it's net positive or net negative tax impact, they would have time over X number of years to absorb those changes. So. In any model, any of these models, you're going to have a billing system. So there's an option we could bill in-house. However, our recommendation is that we look at an external billing provider, someone like Aquaterra, who does already provide utility bills to customers and already has the framework for that, and that we would work with them to have them apply the bills. And someone like Aquaterra, they already do this for. Like Wembley has garbage removal. Wembley takes care of their own garbage removal. They just use Aquaterra as the billing provider, and there's administrative savings there. So that would be our suggestion going forward. Again, I mentioned the environmental impact. This does, a lot of cities that do implement this, all of them have a credit system, right? So that there is the ability to reduce the stormwater charge if you are showing some of these, innovative practices, and there's a credit system that's designed for that. One of the greatest, advantages of moving to a stormwater system is that it has, it makes for our tax rates to be more comparable to other jurisdictions. So places like St. Albert and Strathcona County and Edmonton, Calgary have a stormwater system, and so their stormwater charges are not on their tax base, right? So in effect, when we're comparing to those cities, our tax rates look a little bit more elevated because we're including a whole stormwater, costs. So there's $8 million a year that's included on ours. That's not included there. So by moving it off to a stormwater system, it will lower our taxes, and it will make for more equitable comparisons between our comparator cities that have stormwater utility regimes. With that, I think the final note is that all the models presented here have been presented to be cost revenue neutral, so that there would be an increased administrative burden to implement a utility. However, we feel that it could be offset with new revenues that are generated from tax-exempt properties. Of course, further analysis, and depending on how council chooses, if council wants to move forward with this, and these models could be changed in various ways, and it could have a net impact either way. But we feel that with the information presented today, we could design the stormwater utility so that it is a cost neutral proposition. There wouldn't be any new revenues generated as a whole, but it would be just a fundamental shift in how we charge our stormwater system and how that's allocated to property owners. So with that, so then again, I'll just reiterate the question we have for council today is whether whether council wants to continue down this route, exploring these models further, which would include a extensive public consultation period and soliciting feedback from the public on the model and what the impacts would be to them. With that, I will open the floor.
Thank you very much. There are 5 people in the queue. So first up is Councillor Laners. Well, you may have lost your chance here, buddy.
You can take that however you will. Okay. Well, that is a lot to chew on. I know, and we've talked about this before. I tell you, I've been doing this for a living for 30 years, and I had a hell of a time keeping up. So that's. I wish you all the best, and if we are deciding to do this, trying to simplify. My experience has been that keeping it simple is often the most, because it is complicated. One of the things you talk about is credits, for instance. Since about 1997, maybe 2000, the city and every other place in the province has already implemented storm reduction facility. That's why we have all these ponds and people do all these weird things already. So if I'm a landowner or a commercial business, I would come back and say, well, I've already done my thing. When I paid my land, I paid an extra $20,000 an acre for my land because they had to build a big storm pond 3 blocks away, and I had to do this and do that, or I've had to adjust my parking lot and put a whole bunch of extra catch basins in because of this, that, or whatever to manage my storm pond, and put in inlet control devices and a whole bunch of other things. So I've already done all that stuff. You're telling me I want my credit, and then Mr. Tarrant's going to look at it and he's going to, well, yeah, no, but you got to do more, and you're going to be in an awkward situation. So, I don't mind. If we decide to go ahead with this, it adds some clarity. I see where you come up with your $7 million, but I would tend to try and keep it simple. So, I know I have a feeling because you want to go to level 1 because you start at 1 and then you say, well, we could do 2, but we could do 2 and we go to 1. So there's a lot of leaning to go towards the 1. My leaning is actually for the sake of simplicity and having councillors trying to explain all this to commercial users that are going to get charged more money, that it's just simpler to have a simple system that's equivalent to kind of what you were talking about with your residential. That would be my leaning, and I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Laners. Councillor Blackmore.
Mr. Tarrant, if we chose to go with the long-term transition from Model 2 to Model 1, believing that Model 1 in the long run gives the most transparent collection, how long would that transition period be? And I realize this is speculative because we haven't really done the work yet, but somewhere in the back of your mind, you have a number for that transition.
I would say there would be a number of variables that we would have to, look at, and to see whether what would be the impetus. And based on council's input, is this more of a, wanting to reduce the impact to property owners? And if that's the case, maybe a longer, a 5 to 10 year transition would be best. If we're looking just to, if the impetus is more to just have it so that we can get the system in place and then do a quick transition over, we could probably do it over 2-3 years. So there'd be a number of considerations that look at, but we could do it, any length of time.
Okay.
Ask a follow-up?
I'll come back to you, it is very relevant. Go ahead.
So the option that Councillor Lainers mentioned just now, is that different than the one option or two option you've given us today?
Through the chair, I believe so. I think what Councillor Lainers is referring to is that to simplify maybe the commercial side, right? So just maybe have a tiered rate rather than having it based on impervious surface area, just to have it on a set amount. That is possible, and we have explored all those models as well. The challenge with those is if we're looking at the variability in rates, that does increase the variability, quite significantly.
I think I was, maybe I didn't explain myself. I think I was leaning just towards whatever 2 was. So.
Okay. And if I could just, in reference to the credit system, the credits could be available to existing property owners that have already implemented some of those systems. And so looking at some of the credit systems in other municipalities, like Edmonton, when they implemented it, if you had an on-site retention or a green roof, or you can demonstrate that you've done something on your property in the development of it, then you could get a credit. So it doesn't have to be just for any new; it could be for existing. Obviously, there would be some parameters that have to be set around that.
Yeah, I'll come back to you in a second. Were you in the queue, Dylan? Okay, Councillor Bosch.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. For the stormwater charges in the credit system, is there provincial or federal grants that can help these, especially commercial businesses, get these systems in place so that they can receive credits?
Through the chair, to my knowledge, there's no grants available. In all searching through all the other municipalities that have done this, that hasn't come up, but we haven't specifically looked for that.
Because I think that would be the next question: is if a business saying, if you want me to do this, not only is it beneficial for me to get tax credit or system credit, but how are you going to help me get this done, right? That was my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. So there's a lot of different dynamics, obviously, to this, and it solves a number of problems. Just a quick summary, I guess, though, is when we compare our tax rates to some of our sister cities around the province, this will make us measure more apples to apples than apples to oranges?
Thank you. Yes, that is correct. That for the cities that have implemented a stormwater utility, it will make our comparisons much more apples to apples. And I listed, I believe there's 6 or 7 in the province right now that have a utility, and most of the major ones, obviously Edmonton, Calgary, I mentioned Strathcona County, and St. Albert, also Lloydminster and Spruce Grove are the others that have.
Okay, and so this just seems to be a province-wide trend then as well.
It seems to be moving that direction. Most of the cities in the Lower Mainland, BC, have gone this route. Regina, Saskatchewan, and Regina and Saskatoon and Saskatchewan have it, and most cities in Ontario, it's pretty common there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to city manager, I just want to ask a question and clarification. Do we know for those tax exempt businesses and facilities, how would this be received by them? And is there a legal problem by going to a tax exempt and saying, oh, by the way, we're going to increase your utility bill by exponential?
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. There is no legal impediment to allowing us to charge this tax exempt properties. It's done, all the municipalities I mentioned in the province of Alberta, they all charge it to tax exempt, and so that is not there. In terms of the perception, we haven't gone out to communities yet, and that's one of the recommendations here is that, if council does want to proceed, we will begin with a public consultation, and we will make sure to engage all sectors that would be impacted and provide council with a fulsome report of what the various impacts would be.
Okay. Councilor, City Manager Nikolai.
I started to turn away as soon as I heard Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just wanted to clarify the issue of motivation, I think, is one that Rory has spent a lot of time on and is characterized very, very well. The two fundamental motivations that are manifesting here are quite different, though. One is an outcome motivation, wherein municipalities will be able to more appropriately and more accurately compare tax rates to one another. And as we're seeing this trend throughout North America of municipalities moving toward a utility structure for storm, we're going to see it much more difficult for us to compare tax rates between those municipalities. So in terms of an outcome, it makes sense for us to examine this and perhaps even pursue it purely on that basis. The more fundamental driver, though, is a principle of utility design that has transcended time throughout the eons, and that is to try to match cost causation to cost recovery. So if you're causing a cost on the system, the utility should be attempting to match cost recovery to cost causation. So when we're seeing these large impervious surface areas and the ensuing runoff that tends to overwhelm storm sewer systems, there's an enormous cost associated with that. In this type of a utility structure, you start to alleviate that occurrence by providing financial motivation for developers to develop less impervious surfaces and more pervious surfaces so that the ground can absorb the water and the storm sewer system doesn't have to. So I would suggest that when we go out to public consultation, the real driver for people is to match cost causation to cost recovery in a more sensible way, given that we can do that now.
Okay. Just before John, I think John mentioned, let's try and keep this as simple as possible, and that information's all great in detail, but you're pulling a Mike O'Connor here, there, Rory. Too much detail. Councilor Laners, and then I would like to recommend that we move to motion time. Thank you. You got the last say.
Yeah, no, and I guess a couple things. So if we're trying to play this, I'll call it a game for lack of a better word, where we do exactly what city manager said. We kind of allocate costs according to the use of that we're requiring. Then what are there other? If you want to take that to the next level, then why wouldn't or other communities doing road and sidewalk utilities as well, so that we all will know what it costs to replace a road and fix a road and replace a sidewalk, and we could charge $6 a month for road and sidewalk replacement, and boy, we'd look really good tax-wise. Maybe we set a new trend, and I'm sure there's other things we could do as well. Street lights, and just go down. I don't know if we can street lights, but there's other things we could do as well, right? So I understand where we're going with this, but I'm not sure that's the whole reason why I would do this. But and I guess I gets back to your credit point. you got to keep in mind too that in 1997 the city was 30,000 people, and we're now about 70,000. So that means about 60% of our area in town is already done the work to minimize and mitigate stormwater management in the city. So you're going to have all those people, short of the Prairie Malls and a few other people like that, but most of the city is already undertaken stormwater management practices already. So, it just doubly complicates the matter. So I'll go back to what Councillor O'Connor said and myself, is keeping it simple, I think is going to, if we're going to sell this, that's about the only way. I think that's the easiest way. It's not the only way, but it's an easier way.
Councillor Bessie.
Yeah, thank you. I know for me, this isn't it. For me, I really hope we do go out to public consult with this. And do we end up adopting it at the end of the day? I don't know. Do I end up voting for it at the end of the day? I don't know. But I think it is important that we have this conversation with the public. And the reason for that is because I'm sure we've all heard it when we ran for this job. We all hear it regularly that there is a lot of people in this community where their priority is to get residential taxes down. And when I looked at the numbers 5 years ago, we were already spending less per capita than many other Alberta cities. And despite that, we've spent the last 5 years razor focused on cost control. And I think we're getting to a point as a community where if we want to get residential taxes down, that's not going to come through cost control anymore. The two reasons we have high residential tax compared to other people is A, because we rely on taxes instead of other revenue sources for a much bigger proportion of our municipal budget than comparator municipalities do. And B, because when you look at the breakdown of our property taxes, our residential properties are carrying a lot bigger proportion of that tax burden than our commercial properties when you compare us to other places. And this is a way for us to get less of our revenue out of taxes and into other revenue sources. It's also a way to have a conversation of, are our residential properties paying too much compared to our commercial properties? And I think those are some really fundamental questions that we need to figure out as a community and we need to figure out as a council. And I think this is a way to start having those conversations about, do we still need to get residential taxes down? Because maybe it's not storm utility model, but it's something like it that's going to happen to get our taxes down. I think those are important conversations for us to start having as a community. So I really hope we do go to consult. We do talk about this as a community. We use this to start talking to people. All right, is residential taxes, that's still a number one priority in this community? If so, what is your community's appetite to get that done? So I hope we do consult on this.
Okay. I really think we need to move on. Okay, thank you.
I would move that this committee direct administration to move forward with public consultation for a stormwater utility focusing on impervious surface area-based model. And I've picked that one because I believe it is the most direct correlation between cost and cost recovery.
Okay, that motion is in order. Is it? Or is there more discussion? I saw a shaking head. Go ahead.
Well, I'm probably in support of this motion, not the support of the notion, not the motion. So I can maybe write a song about that if I had to. But so I honestly, my experience is it's as much as the technical part of me is itching to do what she's saying, I think I just smells it's going to be way too complicated to sell. So, I could live with a motion that says go forward with some consultations, but I only see it as model number 2 itself.
And I see Dylan Bressie's mic still on.
So that was just on from before.
Okay. Should we direct this back to administration, or are we going to call? Motion on the floor. Okay, we'll call the question. It's defeated. Okay, so what's the next steps, Mayor Clayton?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I would make a motion that committee direct administration to move forward the public consultation for stormwater utility, focusing on version, I don't know, Model 2, or is it version 2? Model 2 as recommended or as illustrated by administration.
Okay, that motion is in order. Call the question. Wow. Okay. Councillor Bosch. Oh, she's not on the committee. Okay. Councillor who's on? Okay. Yeah, you can make a comment.
Thank you. I think if this is going to public consultation, these options need to be given to the public, whether it's one or it's two. You can't just pick one, I don't think, because you're going to have the same thing that we have here right now, where you have, a lot of different ideas and methodologies. So I would like to persuade somebody on this committee to do a quick facts, like super quick synopsis, points of interest. This is what someone would pay. This is what someone would pay. Something that people can identify, whether one or two is the avenue that they would prefer. I think giving people more information is due diligence on our part versus us picking one or the other on their behalf. Only in regards to this is something very new environmentally, and short of a referendum question, it is basically giving the public some pieces to identify with.
Looks like our chair's a bit busy.
Yes, yeah, I had a buzz in my ear. This is a bee city. Anyway, Councillor Thiessen.
Yeah, thank you. We are a B City, which is great, but it doesn't have anything to do with stormwater utility management. I actually really agree with Councillor Bosch, and I think that gets covered by option 3 here when we have to talk about the transition from Model 2 to Model 1. Obviously, my personal preference would be that we were able to settle down on something that we all feel confident on, but what I'm getting around this is kind of what's rattling in my own head. It's a lot to comprehend, a lot to digest, and a lot that even the public isn't really going to understand when they go out to it. Even if we show them all 3 options, they're really not going to know which one's the best. It's going to create a little more work for administration, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into this so far by our teams. I'd really like, one of the things that I'd like at least our administration to go out to the public with is exactly what our city manager Bob Nicolay said before, is that we need to have the cost recovery component of this so that the stormwater utility is actually taking care of its own replacement as we develop the system throughout it. And if there's a way that we can explain that to the public, yes, your municipal taxes are going to go down. Yes, you're going to get this, but at the end of the day, it's going to cover off all these costs. And when we do that, that means MSI dollars and other stuff is going to go to streets, roads, sidewalks, parks, and other amenities rather than the stormwater, if the stormwater can take care of itself. Or at least that's how I'm understanding it. And if we can convey that to the public, I think that's probably pretty good. I don't want to burden administration with more work, and I definitely don't have a vote on this committee, but I would encourage somebody to make a motion for maybe 3, since 1 and 2 didn't pass, unless you can find an agreement. Thanks.
Okay, I have Councillor Bressy, then Laners, then Blackmore, and let's try and. Well, I'll recognize Mayor Clay. She is the mayor, so I will accede to the boss.
So similar to Councillor Thiessen's comments, I think that consultation on both models, although there's been some consultation, hasn't been specifically explained in detail enough for people to absorb it, in my opinion. So first question for Mr. Tarrant. What has the messaging been in the consultation so far?
Through the chair, so there has not been any formal consultation so far. The only time this has come public before was in January of last year, when it was presented to council. At that point, there was two media articles that were written up about it, and there was actually very little conversation generated out of it, and it kind of fell flat. And that was the extent.
There was another marketing small campaign on stormwater management that went out, and what was the feedback on that one?
So that one was on just we did just a general awareness campaign on our stormwater system and letting people know about how we fund it and how it operates and those types of things. And we had a small survey just asking if people had any issues with stormwater or getting their feedback there, and the uptake was not very strong. It's not a high priority for much of the community. There's a few people in certain areas that they had some stormwater issues, mentioned that, but overall wasn't a significant. We didn't get significant feedback from it.
Yeah. So I just, Mr. Chairman, make a motion that committee to direct administration to proceed with community consultation plan explaining option 2 and option 1. And with that being said, in the consultation, I would suggest that the communication be that council is preference is to go through option 2, transitioning into option 1. Sorry, you did a shuffle there. Yeah.
Okay. There is a motion on the floor. Once we have that up. You know you're running long when they have to bring in a sub-city clerk. In the meantime, there are 3 people still have questions, so Councillor Blackmore, Laners, and Resi.
Point of order, I think that once a motion's on the floor, the discussion has to be in regards to that motion.
Yeah.
And my discussion is, I will vote to support the motion. However, I don't believe that option 3 is the option of choice for everybody at the table. So there's a comment added to the motion, and I'm just disagreeing with the comment.
Well, I will to the motion, and if it's passed, then it will be. So, right? It doesn't talk about timeline of transition.
Yeah.
You tried to pass 1, somebody tried to pass 2, I'm trying to pass 3.
My comment toward the motion was, while I will support the motion, I don't necessarily support items number 2 or 3.
Go ahead, Councillor Laners.
Yeah, I don't see option 3 on the motion, so I see option 1 and option 2, and letting people, discuss it. It's the old blue cup, red cup theory about discussion, and that's what makes me nervous, because like I used to do with my kids, you're getting some milk. Would you like it in a blue cup or a red cup? And so we're automatically telling people, you're getting a stormwater model. You tell me which one you want, which rat you want to swallow. Like, in my mind, to make the process fair and transparent, I would say, or Model 1, Model 2, or status quo. Because right now we're telling everybody, you're getting a stormwater model. It's just which flavor of ice cream do you want? So, and I don't really care for that. So
I'm happy to remove that portion from the motion to just encourage to proceed with.
The chair recognizes City Manager Bob Nicolai.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I think the mayor was about to make my point as well. There's no preconceived outcome on the consultation, or at least that hasn't been the intention of management. So in going to consult, if the overwhelming response from the community is leave it alone, that's what council will hear through the feedback process, and we wouldn't be advocating otherwise.
Yeah, that's why I just think that should be people should be allowed to say that. Right now we're asking, what do you want? One or two, and they should say, no, hell, I don't want any of it. I'd rather pay higher taxes. So, but anyway, I think Mayor was going to.
I was trying to
adjust something.
Yes, and Mayor Clayton.
We can strike the last part from the motion, that the motion just read to proceed with consultation on both option 1 and 2. Thanks.
Call the question. Crossing fingers. Oh, it carried. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone's patience in this. We will move on. There is no correspondence. There's no other business. Thank you, Mr. Tourette. No bylaw and policy review and standing items list. Director Glavin.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor. So today we've addressed items 1185 and 1170. 1185, there was a subsequent motion to bring back funding sources. We're going to endeavor to do that for council upcoming next week to try and keep things moving on that. If that's not possible, it will be at the next committee meeting. There is another item on here that was initially slated for 2023 that will be on next week's agenda, that is, or next committee's agenda, which is 1185, the pathway between 72nd Avenue and 68th Avenue in Muskogee Park. With that, that's my update.
Okay. Councillor Blackmore.
I move that committee receive the outstanding items list as amended.
Okay. Thank you. Call the question.
Mayor Clayton in favor.
That motion is carried. We now need to entertain a motion to go in camera. However, before, I would like to move that we have just a quick bio break before we go into in camera. Or do you want the motion, then we'll do a bio, or what? Okay, go ahead. Okay.
I move that we go in camera.
Give me a second, Joe.